Step 1. Get corrupted power. Step 2. Well, actually, that was it. There is no step 2. So first of all, I'll need to explain why this one particular skill is busted beyond belief. So busted, it can one-shot any normal enemy and even some bosses. It goes without saying, the corrupted power skill will probably get nerfed in a future patch. This video will be split into an explanation of how and why corrupted power breaks the game, followed by some showcase footage of several different runs, all featuring it. So let's get started. Corrupted power as a skill has seen multiple iterations throughout Dead Cell's lifespan. At first, it was rather underwhelming, being able to boost your damage on a flat rate. Someone over at the developer's den had the genius idea of making the skill increase your damage based on a percentage instead of a flat rate. Now, why is that significant? Well, damage scaling in the game can get really insane if it's percentage based, especially when it hasn't gone through much testing. In this case, the percentage boost reads 50%. This number doesn't seem to change depending on your scroll count, which means it can actually work with any of the 3 colors. How corrupted power works is that it adds another instance of your damage that's boosted by 50%. So every time you hit a target, one number will represent how much damage you deal by default, and another that comes from the skill. The only problem is the extra damage is actually 150% of your usual damage instead of just 50, as it says on the tooltip. Which means, while corrupted power is active, your damage output is actually 250% of your normal damage. 100% as per usual, and another that deals 150% from corrupted power. Another thing is that the cooldown of the skill hasn't been touched at all. Although the cooldown reads 16 seconds, it starts as soon as it's used. Since the damage boost lasts for 8 seconds, you realistically only have 8 seconds of CD. Now I know what you're wondering, but there's a caveat. You also take more damage while it's active. Well, as it turns out, after using it a good bit, I can say with almost certainty, it almost doesn't matter. The damage boost is enough to shred any unlucky enemy to come into your path, and they'll never get a chance to counterattack. So how do we use this? Well, unfortunately, corrupted power doesn't work with all the weapons. The skill doesn't function with DOT effects, and only boosts your damage if your weapon is physically hitting an enemy. So stuff like Alchemic Carbine and Bloodsword are immediately out. Since it amplifies every hit you do, faster weapons generally benefit more from this. But what about the cooldown? You can't have this active all the time. Aside from running CD mutations like Instinct, I'll have another solution regarding running the Face Flask skill, which is another damage booster that can be popped during corrupted power's downtime. But I'll go into detail on how this can be done in the gameplay section. Now a disclaimer. Is this an unintended feature? Yeah, most likely. Will it get patched in the future? Yeah, most likely. However, on Steam, you can downgrade your version to 3.0, which is the version I'm recording this video on. So this version of the corrupted power will forever be in the game. Aside from being an unfortunate and, frankly, hilarious glitch, indeed, the beauty with corrupted power is that you have a lot of flexibility of what to run it with. Play your favorite weapon and watch everything become completely trivialized. Let this be a reminder just how ridiculous percentage scaling can be in this game. Without further ado, let's see some gameplay. If you've been observing closely, yes, I sound a little different than usual, and that's because I'm still a little bit sick. So, this first game will be featuring the Sonic Carbine on a tactics build. And I'm just gonna start here in the bank, and I believe this is the biome right before the first boss. I'm doing this because it's just to skip the early game, since there's really not much that goes on. Mainly, you just want to get vengeance with Face Flask, and then everything will be set up. So, to address the elephant in the room, I am running Face Flask because it can actually accommodate the downtime it has with corrupted power. Once corrupted power is in cooldown, you can just pop Face Flask. It is yet another skill that's also really busted, but nowhere near as busted as corrupted power. All it does is that it deals 5 damage to yourself. Combined with the Vengeance mutation, it's basically like a damage boost on demand. You can pop it when Corrupted Power is in cooldown, or you can just pop both of them together in case you really need that damage. And it goes without saying, this style of video is going to be a blast from the past for some of you that have been watching this channel for a while. On tactics, you can realistically run this with any item that you want. I just picked Boomerang and the Quick Bow since they were the most compatible with it right now. And I was really confused here because I actually haven't had that much experience in the bank, and I was really confused when you had to pay like 1,000 gold to enter a room that had an enemy in it. There's not even treasure. That just struck me as a really hilarious feature. So for this run, I'm also going to be running Instinct because of how much crits that you do. You can just pop Corrupted Power like every 6 or so seconds because when you deal crits, it reduces the cooldown. And in case you're wondering, I am using custom mode and I have everything except for Corrupted Power and Phase Flask unlocked as the skills. Realistically, you just need Corrupted Power, but you can really run this with any weapon. I don't believe I have any weapons locked, so it's still possible for me to find every single tactics weapon. So I believe I found a Sonic Carbine in the transition room, and we're gonna jump right into the Conjunctivius fight. Now, as you can see, the Sonic Carbine, even though if it doesn't crit, it still does solid work. On tactics, you can basically go all out on damage. You don't exactly need any shields. Well, you can, it's just I choose not to because Boomerang is such a good skill to have. Followed by Sonic Carbine, you can shred through anything. As you can see, once we're done with this section of the boss fight, we're gonna get right back into shredding the boss. There you go, second tentacle phase. As long as you're being careful, basically don't do what I just did there, you can essentially no-hit any boss in the game. I always found the tentacles to be the hardest section, so once we're done with this, we can go right back into shredding Conjunctivius, and just like that, there we go. If it weren't for my carelessness, this could have been a no-hit, easily. We're gonna move on to the graveyard now, and by this point of the game, you can see how everything is adding up. Essentially, your build should be at its strongest here, in my opinion. So you see how the Sonic Carbine is essentially ripping through everything. I felt like the graveyard is just the best place to showcase what this is capable of. I'm not sure if you can tell the difference between a Corrupted Power shot versus just a normal one, but if you try this for yourself, the difference is night and day. Now, I actually suspect that they'll patch this in the next patch, but what I really found interesting is that they actually introduced this change to Corrupted Power like 2 updates ago, but they didn't address it at all in 3.0, which means they probably was not aware that this was in the game. Which I don't blame them, because I didn't know this was in the game until like a couple weeks back. Another example that almost broke the game was in patch 2.3 when Barb Tips was introduced. Of course, Barb Tips has been nerfed multiple times. Now it's still pretty good, it's just way less good than what it was originally. So at this point, I expect them to actually fix the damage scaling, but I also feel that 50% damage boost might not be enough to justify it also increase the damage that you take, being purely a damage booster. This version of Corrupted Power is definitely probably even stronger than Barb Tips, if you ask me. So we're gonna go into the cavern next. So this is truly what you would consider endgame. And I'm gonna put the ultimate test to Corrupted Power. Can Corrupted Power deal with the most powerful enemies in the game? And while it can't kill the ground shakers before they do the ground slam attack, it's still pretty good. Because you have to keep in mind, Sonic Carbine isn't actually critting right now. So if you consider that, the damage is absolutely nuts by this point. And later on, I'm gonna showcase a Brutality build because I wasn't quite convinced. What if it wasn't actually compatible with every single weapon in the game? So that's actually what I ended up doing. But as you can see, at this point at least, it's able to shred through every single elite enemy. It basically trivializes the game. So if you want to get your free wins, this is the chance. We're also expecting a boss rush update sometime later this year. And if this version of Corrupted Power is still going to be in the game, I fear for the balancing of that mode. Of course, the game plan at this point is to just throw the Boomerang, and then just blast away with Sonic Carbine. Sometimes you don't even have to use the Sonic Carbine because the Boomerang by itself is just really overpowered. Now yes, you do take a considerable amount of damage if you do get hit, but the thing is, with Vengeance, you can actually reduce some of that damage that you take. So that's always a plus. So at this point, I'm just gonna clear up every single small enemy, and once we get to the giant, you guys are gonna see just how ridiculous this can get. Now, I don't have footage of the entire run, but I do have footage of people sending me their own gameplay of Corrupted Power, and it's able to actually skip certain phases of boss fights. And here we go. This is the giant fight. Now, I learned my lesson of not popping both Corrupted Power and Phase Flask as soon as the fight starts because of the animation where Giant enters the second phase. But anyways, not even a problem because all you have to do was to just beat the Giant in like 8 seconds. And with Corrupted Power, it is absolutely doable. So I believe I went to the DLC area and we're gonna jump straight into the Queen fight because I didn't feel like the footage that I got from the Shipwreck as well as the Servants fight was really that noticeable. So we're gonna go into the Queen fight, which in my opinion is actually easier than the Servants. So the thing you can do with a lot of ranged weapons is that while the Queen is throwing those reality slices at you, you can just throw like a boomerang at the direction of the boss and then they will just keep taking damage. The thing with the Queen fight is that even though you're running a really fast build, you don't have that long to react to her attacks because everything in this fight just happens so quickly. And there we go, just like that, the Queen is down and we're gonna move on to the next build in this video. So I decided to run a weapon I have never showcased on this channel, the Hayabusa Gauntlets. Now normally this item is generally conceived as a okay weapon. The thing is that it's really hard to get enemies down to below 40% health. And once you do, they'll mostly likely just be dead already. So realistically, you can only land like 1 or 2 crits on select enemies that have enough health. So once again, I decided to start in the Corrupted Prison because this is the biome where you'll most likely run into trouble surrounding your power in your weapons. This is essentially the hardest hurdle in a run to overcome. But as you can see, Corrupted Power indeed works with melee weapons as well, so it's not just tactics that get all the special treatment. Another weapon I've considered using was the War Spear, and I've tested out off camera, it works incredibly well with this. I've actually considered showcasing that instead of the Hayabusa Gauntlets, but it doesn't hurt to see an underdog perform well once in a while. Again, realistically, you can run Corrupted Power with anything that physically attacks enemies. So, as long as it doesn't inflict a status effect, like the Alchemic Carbine or the Blood Sword, because those weapons deal the majority of their damage through DOT effects, in that case, Poison and Bleed respectively. And for some reason, Corrupted Power does not work with DOTs, unfortunately. Of course, at this point I realized a demerit of running this setup is that if you have a weapon that doesn't really cover a lot of range, you might run into some trouble regarding flying enemies, as in the case with this setup. Since Corrupted Power and Phase Flask has no form of area control or has no sense of crowd control, it only boosts your damage, you really have to rely on your main weapon to do all the damage for you. And sometimes this may not be very good because, as you can see, the gauntlets don't have a lot of range. So to cover up that weakness, I am running a shield. Now, another thing with Brutality is that there's not a lot of support weapons. While I did think of running the throwing knife or the firebrand, those actually inflict DOT, so they don't really work. So after you see me foolishly run into a couple of spikes, I'm gonna try to wrap up this biome and get into the Conjunctivius fight once again. Now, this was honestly worrying for me because given the gauntlet's short range, I was honestly thinking whether or not this can actually hold up in the next fight. So we'll have to see. But at this point, I realized how overpowered the Killer Instinct mutation is, at least in biomes. Sometimes you actually get the Corrupted Power skill again, even though its time limit hasn't actually gone up yet, because you're just massacring everything that you see, that the cooldown comes back really fast. So here we go. We're gonna wait for Conjunctivius to do the dash attack, and then we're gonna go ham on this giant eyeball. And I was pretty satisfied with how it's performing so far. Of course, that's just a strategy that you can do. By waiting for Conjunctivius to dash into you, you can get some pretty good damage in, since the boss is going to be right in front of you afterwards. So let's see if I foolishly get myself hit in this fight once again, which I probably will, to be honest, though I don't quite remember the outcome of this fight. And then something else I figured out later on is that Vengeance unfortunately actually scales its damage with Brutality, so this mutation is more effective if you're running red. But honestly, I found that the damage scaling doesn't get that insane, even in the late game. So I'm gonna get damaged here because I missed a parry, and I'm actually gonna use a health flask. You'll definitely see me being a little bit rusty in this fight, but that's mainly because the weapon I chose for this showcase isn't really too good at handling Conjunctivius. So we're finally gonna get to the second tentacle phase, and we're just gonna try to hold things out. Just try not to get hit from now on, since I'll definitely need to visit a food shop to recover from this. And also, the level of corrupted power doesn't really matter. I know on the tooltip it actually gives you a damage boost, but even if the corrupted power is at like a 6th tier, the amount of damage boost that it gives you actually does not change. Like, it will forever boost your damage by 150%, even if it's found at like the beginning of your run. So we're gonna finish off Conjunctivius with one more parry, and we're just gonna go to Graveyard once again, because I really need the food shop. With all these small rats moving around, you really want a shield to kind of accommodate this. But again, this is because I'm running Hayabusa Gauntlets. You can run this with any single Brutality weapon in the game, even survival ones. Corrupted Power also seems to do some weird shenanigans with the boss damage cap, though I'm not sure how it affects it specifically. All I know is it actually widens the boss damage cap, so you can actually deal more damage to bosses in a single hit. Not exactly sure how that works. So at this point, my brain is essentially on autopilot. Just hit everything in sight and you're good to go. Some enemies are pretty weak, you can basically play One Punch Man with the gauntlets. So with the combination of 2 cooldown reduction mutations, it's able to make this run a lot smoother. It's really able to smooth out the gaps in the setup. You can basically just pop Corrupted Power on cooldown. As soon as it's done, just use it again. And if all else fails, you still got Phase Flask to back you up. Now, the only thing about Phase Flask is that it doesn't really work if your setup is already struggling, because if you're already low on health, you would not use Phase Flask. This win more type of skill really works if you're already doing so much damage, you might as well just pile on a bit more, which is exactly what I'm doing here. With Corrupted Power, you essentially become invincible. Is this going to be the meta way of playing the game? Well, I don't think so. In fact, I don't think there is such a thing as a meta system in Dead Cells. Given the fact that the game is always being updated, some of those updates can fundamentally change the game on how it's meant to be played. In fact, there's probably more hidden mechanics out there that further breaks the game, though those have yet to be discovered. Obviously, in the next couple of patches, I'm really curious on what the devs can do next that may or may not break the game, because it's really fun to break the game. So I got a curse from the graveyard, and I'm just gonna carry it into the caverns. So once again, I want to fight Giant because I want to see just how fast I can melt that giant skull. So I still have to be a little bit careful at this point because one hit and I am dead. But fortunately, it doesn't really matter. The Corrupted Power just gets you through everything. So against the demons, they might fly and fire projectiles at you, but you can just use the shield. And I know this will get asked every now and then, but some of you might be thinking, why am I not doing showcase videos anymore? The truth is, I just don't enjoy making that kind of content anymore, but that is not to say I'm never gonna do another one again. Like what I'm doing here, this is essentially a showcase video. There was a point last year, I think around this time, where I just did that, where I just posted one showcase video per week for this channel, because at that point I was at like a full course load at college, and every single week I would just promise myself, okay, it's time to go here and make a new showcase video. That is my job. I need to keep making videos to stay consistent. For a while, it felt like I was at a part-time job. The only reason I do YouTube is because I enjoy doing it, and if I can't enjoy the content that I create, then what's the point? So it's not that I'm against showcase videos, it's just that I don't enjoy doing them as much as I did before. So hopefully this will shed some light on some of you that have been following this channel for a while, why I just don't do it anymore. But in the near future, I may or may not showcase new weapons as they come out, because some of these weapons that they introduce are pretty creative. And also, as I'm gonna enter a graduate program, I unfortunately might be uploading a little bit less because school is starting next week. So this may be the last video I put out before the term starts. Alright, let's go back to the run. So any enemy that doesn't get one-shotted will die really quickly. And even during bosses, I found out that because they die so quickly, you can't really land that many crits, even though their health is below 40%, as you guys will probably see a little bit later. So, here we go. This is essentially the ultimate melt test. How fast can I melt Giant? Now, I decided not to pop Corrupted Power and Phase Blast right away because I wanted to pop it when I was actually hitting the eyeball. And look at that, we're just gonna do a stand rush attack JoJo style. And just like that, Giant is down. And this time around, I decided to go to Hand of the King, just to try out how it performs in another biome. So we're gonna pop it right away, and I thought for a second there I was actually gonna skip the enemy phase, but I guess I wasn't fast enough. So we're gonna get rid of the worms first, and then I'm gonna wait until Corrupted Power comes back before continuing, because I want to melt Hand of the King. So, Hand of the King comes back, and I think he's gonna do one ground slime attack, and we're just gonna finish him off. There we go. Now that is what I call pure skill. So I gotta warn everyone that are not familiar to this channel, because what you're about to see next is going to be spoiler content for Endgame. If you haven't reached 5 BC, this may be the time you want to turn away. So I don't believe I'll feature that much footage from the Astrolab, because there really isn't that much to see here. I really wanted to see how Hayabusa gauntlets would perform at the Collector. Of course, we're gonna switch up some of our mutations at this point, because I really want to be safe. Now, I actually don't have that many stats in Brutality right now. In fact, 31 is considered to be on the slightly lower end in terms of how many stats you should have at the end of the run. Normally, I have around 32 and maybe a little bit more, so this really goes to show you really don't need that many scrolls to make this extremely powerful. So it wasn't later until I found out that once I was in the Collector boss fight that Hayabusa gauntlets doesn't really work too well, since you can't actually get his health down to below 40%. So we're gonna skip the tower climb and we're gonna go into the final boss. Now, I'm gonna wait till he does an attack so I can get in the full range of damage. And he's gonna do a ground slam, and you'll see here, very unfortunate, I do get hit because I was stunned and then one of those balls came down and hit me. So, a little unfortunate in that regard. But as you can see, even without crits, the gauntlets do so much damage to the Collector. Now, one more round of attacks. I'm gonna wait until I kill all of these enemies, and then when Collector comes back, I'm just gonna go nail him with both of these skills in tandem. I believe that is the third heal. He's gonna teleport us to the last room. And at this point, I'm just wanting the fight to be over as soon as possible. So after we do a couple rolls here, also giving me time to put the Corrupted Power back into cooldown, he's gonna do one more spin, and I think this is the time where he drops the Flask. So we're gonna drink it, and I'm just gonna do some parries because, let's be real, if you have a shield, the Collector's attacks are essentially in vain. So we're gonna get him right then and there concludes the showcase of Corrupted Power. So hopefully you learn a couple of things from this video, and have fun breaking the game on your own. This is truly a game changer of a skill. So play it before it gets patched, have fun out there, and I'll see you in the next video.